Jack, where's Mark? Emily held her newborn baby in her arms, confused as to why she was seeing their old friend instead of her husband. Where was Mark? Where was Mrs. Barnes? Could something have happened to them? Just last night, Emily had spoken with both her husband and her mother-in-law to confirm the time for her discharge. But today, their phones had stopped responding. The young mother had already started to suspect something was wrong. Hand the baby to the father. Let's capture this historic moment on film. A hospital photographer appeared out of nowhere, gesturing to Emily on what to do. Leave, Jack said quietly but firmly. The round man with the camera was about to say something about the importance of the moment, but the stern look from this strange man stopped him. What a cheapskate, he thought as he retreated. Emily, congratulations on the birth of your daughter. Mark and his mother are fine. But you and I, we need to talk. Let's go. This conversation won't be easy. All three, Emily, her husband Mark, and Jack, who had unexpectedly shown up instead of her husband, had been friends in college. In their freshman year, Jack had even pursued her, but she had chosen another guy from their group instead. Mark appealed to her more. He was better looking and had a livelier personality. For 2 years, until they graduated, the couple was inseparable. Their relationship hadn't affected Mark and Jack's friendship. At first, the rejected suitor sulked a bit, but eventually he accepted the situation and started seeing Emily only as his friend's girlfriend. Or at least, he pretended to. What went on inside him, only he knew. For the students, the situation didn't seem strange. College romances flared up like matches, here and there, and just as quickly, they fizzled out. But as graduation approached, the question of the couple's future became unavoidable. Emily lived in a different city, and finishing college meant they had to leave the dormitory. Mark, I spoke with the manager at the store where I work evenings. He's offering me a full-time position for now. And maybe later, I'll find something better. How about we rent a place together? Even just a room. Of course, love. Mark embraced her. I'll find a full-time job too. We'll make it work together. But Mrs. Barnes, Mark's mother, immediately objected when her son excitedly shared their plans with her that evening. What apartment? And who's going to help me? I can barely make ends meet on my librarian's salary. You think being an adult is easy? Look at this utilities bill. I barely managed to support you while you were studying, and at least then you contributed a little from your side jobs. Now I was counting on you working full-time and helping me out. That's your duty as a son. I'll still help you, Mom. Emily and I have already decided to live together. Help, you say. I know how it is with young couples. You'll forget about your mother in a month. Mrs. Barnes turned away to look out the window, pouting. I'll help you as much as I can, but I'll live with Emily. Well, if that's the way it is, bring her here. You two can live in the big room. I'll move the TV to my room. You won't have to spend money on rent, and she seems like a nice girl. By the next week, Emily had moved in with her mother-in-law. The young woman wasn't thrilled about it. She had hoped to have a place of her own with Mark, even if it was just a rental. But Mark explained how hard it would be for his mother without him. Emily didn't want to force him to be torn between two people he cared about. The three of them coexisted relatively well in the apartment. Even Mrs. Barnes, contrary to Emily's worries, always spoke kindly about her. She helped clean without being asked, enjoyed cooking, and never argued when small disagreements arose between the two women in the kitchen. But sometimes Emily would bring up the topic of moving out with Mark. Maybe we should move? A friend offered to rent us her one-bedroom place, and it's not too expensive. I think we're fine here. What's bothering you? We barely have enough money, Mark. I can't even afford a decent winter coat. You give almost all your paycheck to your mom. I'm using mine to buy groceries for the three of us. Oh, I was worried it was something serious. Why do you say for three? Mom shops too. Don't exaggerate. If we rent from your friend, we'll have to pay rent too, only to someone else. Emily turned away in frustration. She didn't tell Mark that his mother only bought the cheapest foods like pasta and bread. She had to buy the meat, cheese, and vegetables herself to make proper meals for Mark, the ones he praised her for, meals that Mrs. Barnes often helped herself to as well. Maybe this is just how things should be. Kids help their parents, Emily thought, scolding herself for being selfish. But the something serious Mark feared did happen. Emily got pregnant. They had been using an unreliable method of contraception, depending on Mark's quick reactions and control. It was a system that failed at the worst possible moment. Mom, we have some big news for you. Mark hugged a smiling Emily during dinner. The young couple exchanged glances. You two planning to get married? Mrs. Bennet was clearly unprepared for change, so she didn't even try to show excitement or interest. That too! Mark wasn't at all bothered by his mother's reaction and kept beaming with happiness. Emily, don't tell me you're pregnant? Silence fell over the table. I am pregnant, Emily said slowly, emphasizing each word. I'm having your son's child. Yes, Mom, I'm going to be a dad soon, and you'll be a grandma. We're submitting our marriage application tomorrow. Be quiet, you fool. A dad, really, Mrs. Bennet waved dismissively at her son. Emily, you at least be sensible. Now is not the time. Please think it through. This isn't the right time to have a baby. The argument went on until nightfall. Mark took Emily's side. Mom, this isn't up for discussion. I won't let a baby in here. I need peace. We could move to Emily's parents' place and lose our jobs, or we could rent an apartment like we wanted to at the beginning, but you talked us out of it. As soon as we buy everything we need for the baby, we'll start looking for a place to live. Just don't forget about the $20,000 for the 2 new windows. I've already paid the deposit, and I can't back out now. After thinking it over, Mark told Emily that he wouldn't move to her parents' place, even though they were happy about the pregnancy news. They couldn't find an apartment right away. Emily's pregnancy was tough, and she was constantly on sick leave due to severe morning sickness, so the already tight family budget became even tighter. They decided to put off renting until the last month and started looking for cheaper options. Due to her poor health, there were days when Emily was completely bedridden. In such moments, Mrs. Bennet would call her son over and quietly plant seeds of doubt. Look at her. As soon as she got pregnant, she became useless. Pregnant, not sick, but now she's pretending to be ill. She didn't even make dinner today. What will happen when the baby comes? She'll forget all about you. And I'll have to deal with everything again. Think carefully before you get married. Mark would nod. He didn't like how their world, once cozy and harmonious before the pregnancy, was changing. But he still married Emily. At the wedding, the bride wore the same dress she had worn to her high school graduation. There was no celebration. They didn't have the money for a banquet. Emily gave birth prematurely in her 7th month, arriving at the hospital in an ambulance. When their daughter was born, she called Mark. We're okay. Don't worry. The baby is in intensive care for now, but the doctors say it's just a precaution. They'll discharge us a bit later. Please, find an apartment. Remember, your mom said she wouldn't let us back in. Yeah, Mark answered shortly, not mentioning that he had already spent their savings and his salary. Mrs. Bennet, hearing about the intensive care, perked up. Mark, listen to me carefully. They don't put healthy babies in intensive care. I'm sure the baby's sick. It's no surprise with how Emily was bedridden from the morning sickness. She's not telling you the truth. Remember that neighbor's kid from the 2nd building? The one who, at 7 years old, can't even say moo or cock-a-doodle-doo? Why would you want that kind of burden at your age? Maybe it'll be okay, Mark replied, though the thought nagged at him. He always tried to avoid that drooling child whose exhausted mother pushed him around the yard. Health problems from day one are already a bad sign. Give up on this while you still can. And where will you go? I told you, I won't let a baby in here. And especially not a sick one. How can I give up now? We just won't let her in. Emily isn't even registered here. She'll go back to her parents and they can deal with the problem. You didn't sign up for a sick child. Mark hesitated. He and Emily had had many happy months together, and leaving her right before she was discharged seemed too cruel. Mrs. Bennet anxiously watched her nervous son, but she was satisfied. The seed of doubt had taken root, and the day before Emily's discharge from the hospital, she offered her perfect solution. Mark, hear me out. Don't get mad. Sam still has feelings for Emily, doesn't he? What, Mom? That was years ago, back in our 1st year of college. Listen to your mother. First love doesn't rust. I saw the way he looked at her when we celebrated your birthday here. It was obvious. Give her to Sam. Your conscience will be clear, and she won't be left alone. Mark didn't take long to think. Emily was getting discharged tomorrow, and a decision had to be made. He called Sam and asked to meet. On the park bench sat two young men. "Are you both nuts?" Jack, with eyes wide in surprise, listened to his friend's suggestion, staring down at his feet. "You weren't in my shoes, so don't judge. My mom won't let Emily and the baby into the house, and there's nothing I can do." Mark scuffed a leaf on the sidewalk. He didn't mention their daughter's health issues, following his mother's advice. "I'm ashamed I ever thought of you as a friend." "Oh, come on. Don't be so righteous. I see how you always look at Emily. Even Oliver whispered to me once that you confessed your love for her while drunk on that fishing trip. By the way, you want to explain why you still aren't married or even seeing anyone?" "It's none of your business. Even if I did have feelings for Emily, they're long gone. I would never lower myself to look at my friend's wife that way." "Well, here's the deal, Jack. Emily's being discharged tomorrow at 11 a.m. You want to be there, fine. If not, don't bother. And if you do, you can come by and grab the crib, stroller, and baby clothes. I'm not some monster who's going to take things away from the baby." "I'm not going anywhere, Mark. Have you lost your mind? Your wife is going to walk out of the hospital alone with a newborn in her arms?" "If you don't come, that's exactly what's going to happen." Mark stood abruptly and ran toward the park exit. He waited for Jack all evening, but Jack never showed up for the crib. The next day, Jack picked Emily and the baby up at the hospital and opened the car door for them. Emily hoped that Mark had just been unable to come for some reason and had sent his friend instead. But from the expression on Jack's face, she knew something was wrong. "Where's Mark?" "Emily, don't worry. Your mother-in-law said she won't let you and the baby into her apartment, and Mark isn't coming. He asked me to pick you up." "Jack, tell me the truth." Emily almost raised her voice, but the baby's crying made her lower it. "Did he just leave me? Or did he rent us a place?" "I think he left you." "I see. My gut feeling was right," Emily nodded to herself as if confirming her thoughts. "But where are you taking us?" "We're going to your parents' house." "What?" "Wait, they don't know I'm coming. We should have at least warned them. And all the baby stuff is still at Mark's place." "They're expecting you, Emily." Yesterday, after his talk with Mark, now his former friend, Jack had been desperately thinking about what to do. Looking at Mark, curled up and sulking, Jack realized he wasn't going anywhere. And he couldn't leave Emily standing alone on the hospital steps with her baby. Especially Emily, whom Jack still secretly loved. But the thought of making her be with him just out of desperation disgusted him. He knew that to her, he'd always been just a friend from their carefree student days, a time that was long gone. Jack remembered Emily had a sister and quickly found her profile on social media. He asked for her phone number, explained the situation, and asked if they were ready to take Emily and the baby in. Her sister didn't hesitate for a second and yelled into the phone, "Yes, of course! Let her come home. But how will we get everything ready in time if she's arriving tomorrow?" They decided not to tell Emily anything beforehand, so she wouldn't worry. Besides, her relatives were busy preparing. And Jack still hoped that Mark would come to his senses. But here, Emily stood with her daughter in her arms, in front of her childhood home. Her parents, her sister, and her brother-in-law came outside to meet them. None of them asked a single question, and no one made her feel guilty. That evening, after Jack left, Emily stood beside a pretty baby crib and asked, "How did you get everything so fast?" "We had some savings, and Jack helped out a lot. While he was picking you up, we quickly divided the tasks, and everyone went to the stores we needed." Jack never told anyone, not Emily or her family, about Mark's suggestion that he take Emily for himself. He thought it wasn't worth revealing such a disgusting idea, one that would only humiliate Emily. She found out about it much later, in court. "I'm not paying child support. That's not my daughter. She's Jack's," Mark declared during the hearing. "She's been seeing him since college. That's why we broke up. I told him, 'Your daughter, you picked them up from the hospital.' And he did. Isn't that right, Emily? Who picked you up from the hospital?" Who picked up who doesn't matter for the court. The judge was already tired of the noisy young man. Either you pay for a DNA test or, as the law states, you pay child support. "Emily, do you agree to the test?" "Of course." Emily confidently smiled at her now ex-husband. Thankfully, time had passed. Immersed in caring for her daughter, Emily had distanced herself from Mark and now looked at him as something to be forgotten. Mark mumbled under his breath and refused the test. On a frosty morning, little Anastasia was christened in a small chapel. The girl turned out to be perfectly healthy. Emily initially wanted to make Jack her daughter's godfather, but her sister sat down beside her and gently asked, "You know if he becomes her godfather, you'll never be able to marry him, right? That's the rule." "Oh, come on. Marry him? He's just helping us out as a friend. I doubt he's interested in me with a baby." "He is, Emily." Her sister took her hand. "We've talked about it. But Jack wants it to be real from your side, not because of gratitude or desperation." "Really? But after Mark, I don't even want to think about marriage. One day, the bad memories will fade, and having such a reliable person by your side will be a blessing. Just think about it. Don't rush to make him the godfather," her sister winked. Emily smiled and asked, "So, will your husband agree to be the godfather? I'll invite Jack just as a guest. Do you think he'll come?" Of course, Jack came to the christening. And a year later, in that same chapel, he walked Emily down the aisle. That's how the story ends, friends. Join the conversation below and share your thoughts on this story. If you found it captivating, share the link with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story that will make your heart race. Your support inspires us to create more tales. Take care and see you next time.